we saw a whole slew of ministers writing resignation letters in which they said, and I'll also stand down as an MP in 2015.
Yeah.
And I think what's so depressing about that is it sends out a message, but it's not worth being an MP if you're not a minister.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is, George Young is an exception to this, but most of these people who are standing down, they're not past retirement age. Hague, Lansley, Willits, they're all in their 50s, and Greg Barker is just 48.
Yeah.
And yet they feel that if they're not a minister, there's no point in staying in the Commons. And I think that's a very depressing thing about the status of Parliament itself.
The most interesting question to ask, I think, is to ask why this change has happened that James has described.
Yeah.
And for a very, very long time, disillusion with all our institutions has been growing.
Yeah.
The Commons is one of them. Expenses gave it a really big kick, and the status of MPs is now unbelievably low.
Yeah.
Almost as low, or in about the same category as
journalism.
political journalists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So you went from one to
So
10.
who now wants to stay if you've been there for a while? Because if you kind of think about it, if you're a Conservative MP anyway, the pay is great by the standards of the average person, the average wage, but not necessarily compared to the people who these MPs have been to university
Of
with,
course,
or who
yeah.
are contemporaries. It's much more difficult to earn outside. Privacy is less.
Yeah.
That loss of privacy also encompasses your family.
Yeah.
And when you've been a minister, everything that you earn is going to be gone through very carefully. The reporting restrictions are bigger than they were.
Yeah.
So people don't hang around doing a Ken Clark. They're going to go,
Yeah.
like Hague, like Willits, like Lansley, like Greg Barker, like others, because being an MP now doesn't have the status it did. It has very little status at all.
I think one of the most remarkable things is how cynical the public are about our politics. Less than 3% of Brits say that they've ever paid a bribe or expected to pay a bribe for the use of a public service.
Yeah.
That is lower than any other country in the EU. Yet when you ask people in this country if they think corruption is a major problem for Britain, 69%, so more than 2/3 of the population, think that corruption is a major problem in Britain today. I think running into that headwind of cynicism every day is just debilitating. Personally, I'd like to see the House of Commons shrunk from 650 today to about 400 MPs. I think one of the problems is that MPs are doing lots of things that should be done by local councillors. They are essentially being social workers for their constituencies.
Yeah.
I think if you massively shrunk the number of MPs and increased the size of constituencies, that couldn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
I also think we need to take a look again about how we think about outside interests.
Yeah.
I personally think that we should adopt a more intelligent approach. Someone like Tim Yale, who has been deselected by association, he was really pushing the boundaries, and the rules should be tightened up. So you can't be a select committee chairman and have commercial interests that are in your field. But I think for backbench MPs, we should be more relaxed.
Yeah.
I would like to see a greater acceptance that, for example, if the price of David Willits staying in the House of Commons was him doing some non-executive directorships and declaring them in the appropriate debates, then I think we should both, as a press and the electorate, should be far more relaxed about that.
Yeah. So what is going to calm if the public opinion is what's putting these guys?
I don't know, and I
what's
think
going to-
James has put his finger on it, but that finger ultimately points to a choice, which is, are MPs going to be citizen legislators,
Yeah.
which means they get their money from the unions or from capital
Yeah.
or from whoever wants to give them money, but they
Yeah.
don't get it from the taxpayer. That's one model. The other is they become professional politicians paid by the taxpayer to do a job,
Yeah.
and they don't have outside interests. But if they do that, if it's a job, they can't be ministers as well. You split the executive and the
Yeah.
legislature.
Yeah.
So that's the logic of the choice.
Yeah.
And as long as they can't make that choice, they're going to be trapped in the middle, I think, as they are now.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever would have thought this until recently, but I now do think that a full separation of powers, taking the executive out of the legislature and
Yeah.
giving Parliament a distinct role, might be the only answer, because I think without that, we're going to end up in a kind of vicious circle where Parliament can't re-establish its own reputation, and where the needs of the executive and the needs to kind of message discipline will continue to kind of cripple Parliament. I think
Yeah.
we might need to do something radical, because that might be the only way to solve the problem.